And so when we went to, for instance, the infamous Al Khalil, Hebron, they saw firsthand. That's as close as you can get to the occupation, right? You see the automated rifle on top of the checkpoint. You see the IDF officers asking for your passport before you walk into to the Haram. And you see the settlements that are quite literally built on top of the souks. And you see the metal grills that are on top of you. And so when we visited Al Khalil, that was the point I felt where my peers were the most familiarized with the occupation, because they saw every single facet of it.
Students from international universities come as interns at the Palestinian universities, sharing their experience with their Palestinian peers and get more knowledge of Palestine as a land and a nation. To talk about that and other exchange programs between foreign and Palestinian universities, I have with me Palestinian American intern student Mariam Shaib, who is going to tell us about her experience at the Palestinian universities. Welcome, Mariam, to our program.
Thank you so much, Usama.
Mariam, you decided to have your internship at the Palestinian universities. What is the reason behind that? Why you didn't choose another university in another place?
Right, I feel like as a Palestinian American, I find that choosing Palestine is very affirmative for my understanding of my Palestinian identity. After all, I am a Palestinian American, and I've lived for over 21 years in New York and in the United States, and I really wanted to gain a better understanding of my Palestinian identity beyond the classroom. And so I feel like choosing a Palestinian university to host my internship and to host my research that I've been doing over the summer was the right choice for me, because I feel like not only did I gain a greater understanding of Palestine on the national perspective, but I also gained more of an intimate experience with Palestine as a nation, and Palestine just as a resistance movement.
Yes, and Mariam, if you tell me about your experience at the Palestinian universities that you spent some time at, in terms of the knowledge that you acquired at these universities, at the same time the everyday treatment, the academic level of the faculty, the students, your experience in general.
Of course.
About the Palestinian universities, yes.
So for about 8 weeks, I was taught by Dr. Nahid Habibullah, who is the director of the Conflict Resolutions and Policy Center at Arab American University. And I took her class on Palestine identity and culture, where we basically learned about the construction of Palestinian national identity in relation to national identity as a topic. And it was just a great experience to learn from such an expert like Nahid, Dr. Nahid. And through her class, I also got to speak with a bunch of guest speakers, among them Dr. Ayman Yusuf, who is a faculty member from the Arab American University. He got to talk about his expertise within the sociological realm of national identity as far as Palestinian identity is concerned. And just hearing him speak and talk about like the different eras of Palestinian identity, how it's evolved as an area of study, how Palestinians have been the pioneers of many areas of study, was something that was an amazing experience. And Dr. Nahid also took us on a bunch of field trips all around Palestine, just to see firsthand how Palestinians deal with the occupation on a daily basis. So just as a student who learns at St. Francis in a small Catholic college in Brooklyn, coming to Palestine and gaining more of a realistic perspective as to what the occupation is on a personal focal point, it was very interesting and very kind of mind-blowing to see these things that you normally read like on paper or from news articles in person manifest quite literally in front of you. And it really leads you to ask and have some of those questions answered as to how you can break those barriers where misinformation lies, and how people can also gain a better understanding as to the structure of Palestine and our dichotomy as a people and as a society.
Yes, Mariam, you raised the issue of the national identity.
Right.
You were born and raised up in the United States, but you got, like, never forget your Palestinian identity, and you came here in order to strengthen and entrench this identity. But tell me, how do the Palestinian youth like you in the United States don't forget their Palestinian background and the importance of having their national identity present with them all the time?
Right. I mean, as a Palestinian American, I would argue that Palestinians or diaspora Palestinians living away from Palestine have a stronger national identity than Palestinians living in Palestine. And the reason why I would argue this is because as a Palestinian American, I find myself basically at the center of advocacy for the Palestinian cause, for resistance, you know. I find myself in school advocating for my Palestinian identity. And the one thing that I kind of needed to complete this puzzle was to understand Palestine for myself in a realm that didn't necessarily include resistance. But through my 8 weeks of my internship and through Dr. Habibullah's classes, I've come to the realization that you cannot have a Palestinian identity if you do not have a political relationship with being Palestinian. And by this, I mean that going to protests and saying free, free Palestine is just the topical understanding of what it means to be Palestine, of what it means to be Palestinian. And so kind of learning about all of the different dichotomies of Palestinianism, learning about where the specific towns and cities are located on a more personal level really strengthens and invigorates your Palestinian identity, or mine as a Palestinian American. And I'd also argue that Palestinians from the diaspora hold their Palestinian identity a lot closer to themselves because Palestine is something that they're so consistently disconnected from. And so for the last time I was in Palestine, I visited with family in 2019, but for 4 years now, I've been disconnected from my land, from my indigenous roots, from the intimate parts of my culture. Something as simple as seeing an olive tree during the time that I've been here has been so meaningful to me, and it is a privilege that a lot of Palestinians don't necessarily acknowledge. Because now I kind of think that because the occupation is something that Palestinians in Palestine have been exposed to on a more upfront and personal level, it's been really easy to suppress the, I want to say, the end goal of the occupation. It's been really easy to suppress every single aspect of the occupation because that's what Palestinians here are used to. But as a Palestinian American living in the United States, I have solely a political relationship with my identity because that's the only way I've been introduced to Palestine, right? I've been introduced to Palestine through the amount of protests I go to, through the advocacy I do from student involvement, through the workshops that I lead as an individual aside from the program. The one thing that this program, that my internship in Palestine has done was reinvigorate my Palestinian identity past its political relationship while still having that context that I'm well established politically speaking, right? So I like to establish and investigate what we really mean when we say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, right? We say that at protests, but coming here for the past 8 weeks, I basically learned what indeed from the river to the sea means, right? And so for a time I visited the Haifa in mid-July, and we went to the Baha'i Gardens. And so while we were at the Baha'i Gardens, we basically deconstructed the way that the scenery looks. To any regular tourist visiting Haifa, they would basically be mind blown by whatever is in front of them. You know, the greenery and the mosques and the homes that surround it, and then you'd have the Mediterranean Sea just ahead of you. But as a Palestinian, living or seeing Haifa right in front of my eyes, I kind of saw that you don't see a single mosque, you don't see a single minaret or a single church in the distance. And so we kind of noticed and we learned that there is a geographical way of how the Palestinian identity has been eliminated in terms of urban landscaping, right? So in Haifa, Jaffa, and Akka have the most fertile lands in all of Palestine. And before 1948, those were one of the first lands that were taken away from us. And so during that time, you know, it's been reconstructed in a way that basically eliminates the Palestinian narrative from the visual perspective. And to see that firsthand, it kind of connected the dots for me in terms of what free, free Palestine from the river to the sea means. And that's kind of a little example as to how I've been able to rebuild my relationship.
Yeah. And Mariam, how strong your voice and the voice of your colleagues and like-minded students is strong at Columbia University? And we know that the Palestinians have their roots in that American university, especially when we remember late Palestinian intellectual and thinker Edward Said, and also we had the Palestinian historian there right now, Rashid Al-Khalidi. So how strong the Palestinian voice at the campus at Columbia University?
Right, so I can't speak for Columbia University. I'm more so a student at St. Francis College, which is a really small Catholic college in Brooklyn. And I have faced a lot of opposition when it comes to either speaking about Palestine or speaking for Palestine. I feel like students across campuses in New York or even in the United States, they face a lot of censorship. And so that's one of the challenges that students, diaspora Palestinians, kind of gaining a degree, a higher degree in any form of education, if they want to speak about Palestine, they're always shut down. And so I have kind of like a firsthand experience of this where I myself helped put together an event for for a solidarity in terms of what is currently happening in the apartheid and whatnot. And a lot of students there was a lot of opposition coming from the student body of a school that I didn't even go to. And so there was a lot of profiling of Palestinians. There's a popular software called Canary Missions where people will make it their mission to profile Palestinian students or anyone who advocates for Palestine and to kind of criminalize them and to demonize them as a form of deterrence from advocating for the Palestinian cause. And so and this is why I say that diaspora Palestinians hold their Palestinian identity a lot closer to them. It's because whenever we speak about Palestine outside of the West Bank or outside of Gaza, wherever we may be, we're always targeted, not only because we're Palestinian, but because we dared to challenge the status quo of the United States. We dare to challenge the political landscape of the United States on the student level. And I feel like advocacy in an academic environment should be protected, and advocacy anywhere should be protected. We shouldn't be targeted for basically saying how international law stipulates something that Israel is not following, you know? We should not be targeted for identifying all of these human rights violations. We should not be targeted for saying that our people deserve to live freely, for saying that we deserve to hold up the Palestinian flag without necessarily being feared of censorship, without necessarily being feared that expressing our national identity should be censored. And that's why I kind of feel like, as someone who lives apart from Palestine, that's actually helped me reinvigorate who I am as a Palestinian. It's helped me reestablish myself as a Palestinian. And it's also helped me advance myself and really establish who I am academically.
Yeah, it's very important, really, Mariam, when we talk with American students or foreign students about Palestine, to focus on the crimes that the Israeli occupation is committing on daily basis against the Palestinian children, the Palestinian women, the murder crimes, the settlement building, the demolition of the houses. All that is important for the world to know the true face of Israel, the face of colonialism. But at the same time, it's important to talk about the Palestinians' everyday life, the Palestinian culture, the Palestinian ability to survive and to build, despite the very difficult situation they are going through. So do you talk about that, the other aspect of the Palestinians' life, to your colleagues and the people you know there?
Yeah, and so during my time in my internship, I've been living in Ain Yabrud, which is east of Ramallah, and it's still within the Ramallah district, so I've had the experience of living with my family, of kind of seeing Palestine from a more individualistic standpoint, where politics is kind of pushed to the side for a little bit. And we have talked about Palestinian life on the individual level, where we visited a lot of just seeing the Palestinian economic landscape, for instance. We got to go to Silwad during the first week of the program, and we got to sit with the youth center, and where we got to learn a lot about like the composition of Silwad, the challenges that people face within the city. We also got to, we got to introduce ourselves to a lot of the food, a lot of the cuisine that's a part of the Palestinian national identity, and how we kind of also came to the conclusion that, food is a really, it's just a language that really unites a lot of people. And so we ate mu'ajjanat at the youth center, and we got to network a lot with the local Palestinians. We got to also sit with Dr. Lana Shihada, who's also an adjunct professor at Arab American University, and she introduced us to a lot of her family, and she's also from Silwad. And so we really got to really sit face to face with the hospitality of Palestinians. As a Palestinian, I'm kind of already used to that hospitality, but my colleagues and my peers were really taken aback by by Lana's invitation to her house. And so we got to meet her mom and her kids and her extended family. And so that was kind of how we got to see the daily life of Palestinians. And I feel like the one and only way you can do that is by inserting yourself into these environments where you kind of see firsthand that there is although there is a pre-existing occupation, we still manage to make a life for ourselves at the end of the day. And just seeing this in Silwad was something that was really mind-blowing, and was something where people who aren't necessarily Palestinian can notice that even though, you know, we have all of these uprootings and we have all of these obstacles that are kind of in front of us in order to express our Palestinian identity, at the end of the day, we can still sit together at the table and we can still discuss kind of lighthearted subjects that don't necessarily have to deal with Palestinianism or the occupation and whatnot.
Yeah, and I saw a number of your students, your colleagues here. Now, how were they affected by visiting the Palestinian universities, the Palestinian villages, as you mentioned, and cities? What idea they were able to form and elaborate about Palestine, and if they were having certain ideas before, how these ideas changed or maybe got better after they got here and saw things with their own eyes?
Yeah, I know just from speaking with my peers that before coming to Palestine, everyone already had like a pretty great foundation as to what's happening in Palestine. Nobody necessarily thought that this was a third world country that is kind of bordering at a failed state. Everyone knew that there's a pretty established society. I kind of think that our preconceived notions about Palestine was kind of highlighted by the experiences that we've had over the past 8 weeks, where we became familiar with the economic landscape, right? We became familiar with the everyday life of Ramallah, where a lot of my peers roomed in an apartment together, and so they had the ability to kind of like live every day as if they themselves already lived in Palestine. So they familiarized themselves with the localities of Ramallah, with like the you know, where to go out and eat, where to go out to the market, and like just the little things about kind of assimilating into Palestinian society was something that my peers were able to familiarize themselves with. And I feel like that is the only way that you can fully really understand what it means to kind of live in Palestine, is if you yourself go through that cultural immersion. So in the States, we're kind of used to transportation being reliable in a sense, right? So coming from New York, I'm used to taking the train every day to school. I'm used to the MTA, I'm used to taking the bus, you know, paying $2.75 for the fare. But here in Palestine, you know, when you have to be in Ramallah and leave Ramallah at a specific time if you want to go back, if you want to get home, you know, at a respectable time, right? And so in Ramallah, you kind of need to, if you were to use the service, for instance, right, they wait until the taxi is full before they actually leave. Or if you were to use the bus to go to Al-Rayhan, to go to universities, you wait until the bus is full before the bus actually leaves. And so it took a lot of adjustment for them in a sense, but I kind of feel like this all contributed into them having a better understanding of Palestine beyond what everyone else outside of Palestine, how they kind of understand it, right? And so they understand the inner workings of Palestinian society, how Ramallah is kind of like an economic bubble. You come here, you literally find everything that you need. Some might argue that it is the Middle Eastern version of New York's economic landscape, where you have a lot of these pop-up shops. You have T Plus in At-Tira, you know, you have a lot of these new fashion stores, but Bahia fashion in Al Irsal, right? And so just taking the time to explore Ramallah for yourself, taking the time to not only rely on like the field visits that we've had, but also venture out and take a walk is one way that my peers have been able to fully understand Palestine. And our field visits also built up on that understanding. And so we got to visit Al-Quds twice during our internship here. And so the first time we took a tour of the Christian quarter, and then the second time we came back to take a tour of the Muslim and the Jewish quarter, and we also got to visit the Armenian quarter. And so that kind of put into perspective for them just how divided the dichotomy is here in Palestine, how there are a lot of forces kind of manifesting themselves into this one city that is supposed to be religiously homogenous, right? And so you have the Muslim quarter, you have Masjid al-Aqsa, and then during our visit into the Muslim quarter, we saw settlers who were quite literally escorted by soldiers. And so that sight to them wasn't necessarily something that they're used to. But me as a Palestinian, I've been to Al-Quds before. I've just never seen that up hand, but I've read about it, right? And as a Palestinian American, you know, who has had experiences with not only reading this, but also kind of hearing everyone's point of view of Palestine and how it's been in conjunction with Jerusalem. Like I know the religious context behind this and the tensions that it really manifests in. But my peers, when they saw that in person, that was really something that kind of opened their eyes to seeing, like, in reality, how the occupation manifests. Sometimes it's direct and sometimes it's indirect. In terms of Ramallah, we regard it as like an economic field. We regard it as like a little insulated bubble for Palestinians. Outside of Ramallah, whenever we would go on our field visits, we see the differences quite literally. Like, in a span of a second, you see soldiers kind of pointing at you with rifles, and it took a long time for them to get used to it, but at the end of the day we kind of like acknowledge that they exist and this is how life is for Palestinians.
Yeah, and Maria, do you think that we succeeded as Palestinians living in the occupied Palestinian territory to turn these students, your peers, to become ambassadors to Palestine in the United States and to deliver the message of the Palestinian people, to talk about the economic, the political, the everyday life situation, the colonized landscape of Palestine?
I argue that we have, well, I know for myself, I have had, these past 8 weeks have basically empowered me to be a further ambassador of Palestine. And just from saying that, like, everyone who was a part of the program already had kind of, they were familiar with the context of Palestine, so they knew what they were coming into. If anything, this kind of empowered them as well, right? And so they already know the political context. The only thing that really empowered them was putting the pieces together, right? And so when we went to, for instance, the infamous Al-Khalil, you know, Hebron, they saw firsthand, that's as close as you can get to the occupation, right? You see the automated rifle on top of the checkpoint. You see the IDF officers asking for your passport before you walk into Masjid, to the Haram. And you see the settlements that are quite literally built on top of the souks. And you see the metal grills that are on top of you. And so when we visited Al-Khalil, that was the point I felt where my peers were the most familiarized with the occupation, because they saw every single facet of it. And when I mean every facet, you are quite literally encased in the occupation. You see the metal grills that are on top of you. You see the trash that is thrown by settlers weighing itself down from the dense amount of it, right? And you see this pattern of harassment that the settlers kind of project onto the Palestinians. It's not direct. It's not, you don't always notice it, but it's around you. Whether it's the trash that is piling down from under you, whether it's an IDF soldier asking you for your passport, whether it's asking for permission to go through a checkpoint to go visit a haram. I remember on our way back from the haram, we were, or by haram I kind of mean the Ibrahimi Mosque, and so we were standing at the point where between the checkpoint to leave, and we were on our way out. And so the checkpoint had malfunctioned, so it wouldn't like turn. And so there were 4 IDF soldiers kind of grouped around trying to fix the turnstile. And so when it came time for us to leave, a settler that was positioned like quite literally like on top of the checkpoint had thrown a water bottle directly at me, and the bottle was filled with pee, and it splattered everywhere. And so that in it of itself, it wasn't only me. It was 2 of my peers were there, and my professor was there too. And so 2 peers who come from outside of Palestine to learn about Palestine experienced what it means to be Palestinian in Al-Khalil, which is on your way out from Al-Haram, your farewell gift is a bottle of pee. And so also while we were in Al-Khalil, we witnessed a home invasion where 6 IDF officers marched into a Palestinian home, and for 30 seconds, everyone around me was silent, because the only thing that we heard was a woman that was screaming and asking for a justification as to why 6 soldiers decided to infiltrate their home. And so just from my description, I can basically kind of tell you in totality what challenges Palestinians face just from staying for 3 hours just from a 3-hour visit in Al-Khalil. You see firsthand a home invasion, you see firsthand the checkpoints, you see firsthand the interrogations, where are you from, why are you here, how long will you be here, are you Jewish? You see firsthand the discrimination that Palestinians are faced just by living in Al-Khalil or just by taking a walk down the souk. You are quite literally encased in the occupation, and there's no way out. Like once you expose yourself to Al Khalil, once you expose yourself to Hebron, that is when you are shaken to your core, and that is when your political understanding of Palestine completely changes. And that after that point, I felt as though my peers already understood what Palestinians face on a daily basis.
Yeah. Mariam, one more question and we finish our interview. Now, when you go back to the United States, some of your peers might come and ask you, do you advise us to go to Palestine and have our internship there? And of course, I'm sure you're going to tell them, yeah, I advise you. But if they ask you, are we going to go through the same experience where Israeli settlers throw at us bottles of pee and maybe stones and other acts of violence by the Israeli settlers? What would you tell them?
I would say I would advise people who don't know anything about Palestine to not come to Palestine for the reason of empowering themselves. Yeah. I feel like you don't necessarily have to be here to learn and to familiarize yourself with the political situation of Palestine. Yeah. The only way I would kind of endorse taking an internship here is if you want to further yourself in advocacy on the hands-on level, and the reason why I kind of took this opportunity to come to Palestine was because I kind of ensured that these 8 weeks we would not in any way, shape, or form be supporting any Israeli enterprise from its microscopic manifestations to its largest manifestations, right? And so I would recommend for people to come to Palestine not only for the central reason of learning about politics or learning about who we are as Palestinians living through apartheid, because you can quite easily read about it. Amnesty International released an over 300-page report just listing out all of the human rights violations that Israel imposes, right? There's a literal chapter about automated apartheid. You can read that to learn about automated apartheid, right? But I do encourage people to come to Palestine to learn about its economic landscape, to learn about its people, to learn about who we are as a people in separation from the occupation. Because I think that as Palestinians, we should try to build our identity to where it's supposed to be independent from resistance. We are supposed to be visionaries, right? We're supposed to imagine what a life here would be like without necessarily having an occupying power dictating how far you can travel, or without having to ask for permission to visit Masjid al-Aqsa or to visit Al-Quds in its entirety. And so I would really, if there's one piece of advice that I would want to give to Americans or to any foreigner watching this, it is to really familiarize yourself with the context of Palestine from every single outlet before you want to come to Palestine, because a lot of the times what you'll experience is a lot of, I want to say, cultural shock, where when you read something, it's a lot easier to come to Palestine when you're already familiarized yourself with the pre-existing literature, right? By reading Edward Said, by reading about Rashid al-Khalidi, by reading about Mahmoud Darwish's poems, by really, really familiarizing yourself with the average Palestinian through literature before you take the move to come and see everything firsthand. As a Palestinian, being here has been a very life-changing experience. I feel like I have a lot of a clear understanding of what Palestinian identity is, just when you include the microscopic aspects of life, everyday life. I know that I kind of mentioned seeing olive trees, but it's something that's really momentous to me as somebody who's almost always disconnected to my land if it isn't the summer. But I also do feel like on the flip side, there is a lot of importance in coming to Palestine and in kind of familiarizing yourself with the landscape. But the one thing that I do implore you to do if you are coming is to make sure that there is no Israeli involvement whatsoever. And by this I mean, don't take the easy way, right? You should empower the Palestinian economy. You should involve yourself in the local economy of Palestine. Live in Ramallah, experience Palestinian life for what it is. And the way that it is to expose yourself to its landscape in its most pure form. And it's to live every day as if you yourself are a Palestinian living under occupation, reimagining and reestablishing your life. And so as like an academic who is studying as a student of political science, I feel like my visit here has been nothing more than an academic experience, nothing more than something that has helped me reaffirm myself and reaffirm my research within like who we are as Palestinians beyond the occupation. And if you really want to come, you should come with the mindset of envisioning a Palestine that is irrespective of the occupation, that is independent from the occupation.
Mariam Shaib, Palestinian American student, intern at the Palestinian universities. It has been a great honor having you on our program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. And from you, Sam Nazal, have a nice time.